Ever feel like life's a whirlwind and you're neglecting those close to you?
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the daily grind.
Totally. But hey, that's why we're diving deep today. We're dissecting this episode called Relationships, the Foundation of a Happy, Caring Life.
Lots to unpack there.
You bet. It's all about building those solid connections, whether it's with family, friends, at work, you name it.
It's interesting. The episode points out how relationships are literally everywhere, not just the obvious ones.
So true. Think about it. Every single interaction, even grabbing your morning coffee, it's a mini relationship in a way.
Right. And to handle this web of relationships, we need the right approach. And the episode stresses this win-win mindset.
Win-win. Sounds good, but
Yeah.
what's a real strategy there?
Well, a lot of times we get stuck thinking, if I win, you got to lose, right?
Yeah, that classic tug of war.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this episode is like, hey, what if we bake a bigger pie instead of fighting over slices?
So collaborating to create something even better.
Exactly. Say you're working with someone, and their style clashes with yours. Instead of butting heads, figure out what drives them, find common ground, and boom, you both shine.
Win-win in action.
And of course, to make this work, you need...
Communication. No surprise there.
Sure, it's obvious, but the episode digs deeper. It's not just about the words, it's the little things too. Your tone of voice, your body language, it all speaks volumes.
You're so right. Imagine giving feedback but sounding super harsh. Totally defeats the purpose.
For sure. And just as we watch our own style, we got to adapt to others too. The episode talks about flexible interactions.
So being sensitive to how others communicate.
Exactly, like dealing with a client who's fuming mad. Sometimes they just need to vent before you can even offer a solution.
Totally. Sometimes a listening ear is more valuable than a quick fix.
100%.
Yeah.
And that brings us to a fundamental concept that this episode really emphasizes. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
A golden rule for sure, but in the heat of the moment, tough to do.
It is. Takes conscious effort. Instead of waiting for your turn to talk, really trying to see things from their side. Ask questions, acknowledge their feelings, resist that urge to jump in with your own opinion.
Easier said than done when emotions are running high. But you're right, that shift in perspective can change everything. It reminds me of this time I totally misjudged a friend until I actually understood what they were going through. Eye-opening.
It's in those moments of true understanding that genuine connection happens.
Speaking of things that can hinder connection, this episode had a pretty wee bit about unsolicited advice.
Oh yeah, we've all been there. That urge to jump in with solutions when someone's just sharing a problem.
Right. But often it backfires. Instead of feeling supported, they feel dismissed. Like you're saying, I know better, even if you don't mean it.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the importance of simply listening. You know, it's funny because as we were talking about listening, it made me realize how rare it is to truly feel heard these days.
It's true, isn't it? It's like we're bombarded with so much information all the time that it makes it really hard to actually just be present and listen.
Yeah, and this episode makes a really good point that active listening, it isn't just about, being quiet while someone else is talking.
Right.
It's about actually engaging with all your senses, your ears, your eyes, your heart, really trying to understand what's behind the words.
Yeah, it's like you're listening with your whole being.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And picking up on those little things too,
Yeah.
right? The tone of voice, body language, all of that reveals so much about what someone's really feeling.
And when you really listen, you create this space for vulnerability.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
people feel safe to be themselves.
Yeah, that feeling of safety is so important for building trust, which, as we've already talked about, is the foundation of any strong relationship.
Absolutely. Okay, so moving on a bit, this episode talks about keeping personal relationships and business separate.
Mm.
And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it's a tough one, especially these days where everything's so interconnected.
Right, because on the one hand, building rapport with your colleagues and clients is important.
Of course.
But like the episode said, there's a danger of letting those business interests kind of overshadow the genuine connection.
Yeah, for sure. Like imagine you're at a friend's party and someone keeps trying to pitch you on their new business venture.
Ugh, the worst.
It's so intrusive, right? Like they're more interested in your wallet than your friendship.
Exactly. It's like, can't we just enjoy each other's company without the sales pitch?
Totally. And while, I think there are definitely situations where personal and professional relationships can work, it takes real awareness and a commitment to the friendship itself.
Yeah, it's about being mindful of those different roles we play in each other's lives.
Exactly. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, the episode talks a lot about the importance of time in building relationships.
Right. It's that whole Rome wasn't built in a day thing.
Yes.
But it's easy to forget. It's easy to think that, just those big gestures or occasional outings are enough to keep a connection strong.
Right. But this episode really emphasizes those small, consistent
It's
actions,
like, what kind of things?
like those daily check-ins, the shared meals, just being a listening ear after a long day.
Yeah.
Those are the things that nourish a relationship.
I like that it's like tending a garden.
Oh, I love that analogy.
You can't just plant the seeds and expect them to grow. You have to water them and weed them and care for them consistently.
Yeah, you have to nurture them, and it's the same with relationships.
So true. And that brings us to another point that resonated with me, that idea of supporting loved ones through thick and thin.
Yeah, the good times and the bad.
Exactly. It's easy to be there for the fun stuff, but are we there when things get tough?
Mm-hmm. That's the real test, right?
Yeah, like when a friend's going through a breakup or a job loss or a health crisis, are we still present?
Yeah. Are we willing to sit with them in their pain, offer support without judgment?
It's those acts of support, those moments of shared vulnerability that really deepen the connection.
Yeah, it's about showing up not just in words, but in actions.
And sometimes the most powerful action is just being present, just listening.
Exactly. And that kind of leads into another important aspect of healthy relationships. Boundaries.
Oh, yes, boundaries.
Remember that garden fence analogy?
Oh, yeah.
Such a good image for understanding how boundaries work. They define and protect our personal space.
But they don't isolate us.
Right. It's about recognizing that we all have different needs and limits,
Absolutely.
and respecting those boundaries is so important for preventing resentment from building up.
Especially when it comes to our emotional well-being, right? Like this episode talks about protecting ourselves from negativity and other people's drama.
Yeah, it's not about being cold or uncaring. It's
Yeah.
about recognizing that, we can't pour from an empty cup.
We have to take care of ourselves first.
Exactly. And that requires being honest with ourselves and with others about what we can and can't give.
Speaking of honesty, that was another big theme in this episode.
Mm-hmm. Such a crucial part of any relationship.
Yeah, honesty is the foundation of trust.
And trust is the bedrock of any strong connection.
It's about being truthful even when it's difficult.
Right. Remember those times when you say yes when you really mean no?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
It might seem harmless in the moment, but over time, those little lies can really damage trust.
And create distance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the episode encourages us to really prioritize honesty even when it feels uncomfortable.
And to think about the long-term health of the relationship.
Right. Because authenticity builds connection in a way that manipulation never can.
So true. And finally, let's touch on mutual effort again.
Ah, yes. The classic two-way street.
It takes two to tango.
It does. It takes two people both willing to give and receive to build a strong connection.
And it's about making sure that both people feel heard, appreciated, and valued.
Right. It's not about keeping score, but about working together so the relationship thrives.
Welcome back for our final look at relationships.
All right. So we've covered the basics. Now let's get practical.
Yeah, let's turn all these insights into something we can actually use.
And communication is a great place to start, right? It's the foundation.
Yeah.
The episode reminds us that it's more than just talking,
Right.
It's about making sure both people feel safe to really express themselves.
So true.
And that means being willing to not only share your own thoughts, but to really listen to what the other person has to say.
Yeah, to truly hear them.
Exactly. Remember those active listening techniques we talked about?
Mm-hmm.
Putting those into practice can make a huge difference.
For sure.
Imagine a coworker is telling you about a problem they're having with a project. Instead of jumping in with your own ideas, you just make eye contact, nod along, and ask questions to make sure you understand.
Yeah. Showing that you're really paying attention.
Exactly. That simple act can build so much trust.
It's amazing how these little changes can have such a big impact.
Absolutely. And another key part of communication is adapting to the other person's style.
Right. Meeting them where they are.
Exactly. Like with that frustrated client we talked about. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just validate their feelings.
Let them vent.
Exactly. And sometimes even more powerful than words is just being present.
Just being there for them.
Exactly. Offering support without judgment can be so powerful.
Okay, so moving on from communication, another big takeaway for me was the importance of empathy.
Yeah, putting yourself in the other person's shoes.
Exactly, but how do we actually do that?
Well, the episode suggests asking questions.
Instead of assuming.
Instead of assuming you know what they're thinking or feeling,
Right.
just ask them.
Show genuine curiosity.
Exactly. It shows that you value their perspective.
And I love how the episode reminds us that everyone is fighting their own battles.
Mm-hmm. We may not always understand what someone's going through,
Right.
but we can offer compassion and support.
Absolutely. So
Uh,
true. All right, let's talk about boundaries
oh, yeah. Boundaries are essential
for any healthy
for
relationship.
any healthy relationship. And it's not about shutting people out.
Right.
It's about protecting your own well-being while still respecting the needs of others.
Remember that garden fence analogy?
That's a good one.
It's about creating a safe space without stifling growth.
And setting those boundaries often requires clear communication.
Being upfront about your needs and limits.
Exactly. Like if a friend keeps asking you for favors you don't feel comfortable doing,
Right.
instead of getting resentful, you can just have an honest conversation about it.
Yeah, I think sometimes we're afraid to have those tough conversations.
Right, but they're so important.
For sure. Okay, so honesty, another big theme.
Honesty is huge.
It's the foundation of trust.
It is, and we all know how important trust is.
Absolutely.
It can be tempting to tell those little white lies, you know,
Oh, yeah. To avoid conflict.
to avoid conflict or to protect someone's feelings. But as we heard, even those little lies can add up.
And damage the relationship.
Exactly. So honesty, even when it's uncomfortable,
Is the best policy.
it is the best policy.
So true. And finally, let's touch on mutual effort one last time.
Ah, yes. Relationships are a two-way street.
It takes two.
It takes both people putting in the effort to make it work.
And it's about making sure that both people feel appreciated.
Respected, valued.
Exactly. It's not about keeping score, but about working together to make sure the relationship thrives. And that wraps up our deep dive into relationships, the foundation of a happy, caring life.
It's been quite a journey exploring all the different facets of human connection.
As we go about our day, let's remember that relationships need care and attention.
They do. They're not static.
And even the smallest gestures can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So here's a thought for you before we go. Think about one relationship you want to strengthen.
Okay.
What's one small step you can take today to nurture that connection?
I love that.
Could be a text, a phone call, just expressing your appreciation.
So simple, yet so powerful.
Exactly. Because every act of connection, no matter how small, makes for a richer and more fulfilling life.
That's it for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.